Do you like shoe shop gunfights? A newspaper contest to find a missing woman? Or maybe missing millionaires are more your thing? These are all stories I found while researching Daily History Shorts. Here's those stories and all the others I found for May 1925. May 1st, 1925. Take your choice. Who is Europe's prettiest blonde? The question is agitating circles that get agitated over that sort of question. Vienna awarded the title to Marie von Eisler above Society Woman. Friends of Mademoiselle Christo de Vigno, left, Hungarian dancer, and Mademoiselle Karolevna, right, Austrian actress, are protesting. Wife, cats, birds was bit too much for New York host. John Hamburger, whose spirit of hospitality led him to grant the freedom of his apartment to the Hungarian violinist Rigo, once noted for his playing before the crown heads of Europe, today told Magistrate Levine that his generosity reached the breaking point when his guest installed a wife, several cats, parrots and canaries, as well as trunks and 25 umbrellas. Hamburger was summoned to court by Mrs. Catherine Rigo, who said that she and her husband had been ordered from the apartment by their host at 2 o'clock in the morning to the accompaniment of loud and abusive language. When Magistrate Levine found that Hamburger paid the rent, he dismissed the complaint, saying he could see no basis for it. Mrs. Rigo said she already had left the apartment and gone to one offered by friends. May 2nd, 1925. Rules wife must forfeit alimony or surrender dog. If Art Accord's wife persists in denying him the companionship and aid of their family dog, he need not pay her alimony. It was ruled yesterday in Superior Court, where Mrs. Accord is seeking temporary alimony pending the outcome of her suit for divorce from the screen actor. The court decided that since the household pet is community property, Accord has a right to utilise its screen acting ability by sending it to the studios and putting it to work earning part of the alimony. Aged man's poem asking for a wife proves effective. John F. Silk Hat John Hurley, 80 years old, former mayor of Salem, Massachusetts, and his bride, formerly Mrs. Catherine A. Driscoll, 52, of Hartford, Connecticut, today were enjoying a honeymoon by visiting the historical spots on the Virginia Peninsula. They were married this week by Chaplain Charles S. Vail of the Soldiers' Home here, where Mr. Hurley had been spending the past several months. The 3 times Democratic mayor of Salem smiled broadly today as he displayed the poem that won his bride. His published plea, "I want a wife," was answered by Mrs. Driscoll, who said she had newspaper experience and knew when she first read the poem that there must be merit to the man who could write it. "You're just the man I want," was her first reply after a visit to the ex-mayor's home, and after a brief period of correspondence she came here for the marriage. Mr. and Mrs. Hurley said they would make their home here. May 3rd, 1925. Would you shoulder the crime of another to shield your sweetheart's name? But what if you accepted under an assumed name right after having invested the family funds, and not only left your father and mother penniless, but also ignorant of your fate or your investment? This is but one of many vibrant situations in the emotional bombshell Emblems of Love, presented by Progress Productions Inc. A picture with more punch than many so-called million-dollar productions. A picture that will get under your skin. Century Theatre, May 4th and 5th. Woman gets divorce as golf takes mate's time. A divorce will be granted to Mrs. Bertha Hacks Auld, widowed by the golfing activities of her 70-year-old husband, Dr. John Maxwell Auld, Judge Joseph Sabbath indicated Saturday. Mrs. Auld testified in court that Dr. Auld was a kind and affectionate husband following their marriage at St. Joseph, Michigan, on September 10th, 1903, until the golfing fever got him. May 4th, 1925. Tricks! Here's a picture of Lowry L. Bransill, famous dog trainer, and his dog, Jack. Bransill has written a series of articles for The Star telling just how you can train a dog to do tricks. Anyone can do it by following Bransill's simple instructions. The series starts Tuesday. Watch for it. Each article will be illustrated with pictures of Bransill and Jack. Jack said he would be glad to pose so other dogs could learn to be as smart as he is. Movie verdict. Ohio. Richard Dix hands out the laughs. Real man-size howls in Too Many Kisses. This movie has the real laugh formula in it. Corking popular jazz musical program makes up the bill. Apollo. Although Emily Fitzroy plays the role of one of those old battle axes of a mother who rules and ruins her household, yet this woman does some wonderfully fine work in The Denial. Johnny Robertson plays a wicked, meaning warm, xylophone solo. Colonial. The Price of Pleasure is an unconvincing melodramatic picture that has good acting, but the actors are handicapped by faulty material. The settings are good music of the popular kind that pleases. Circle. Walter Hyers proves that at least one movie actor has found the secret of making a personal appearance a big victory instead of a miserable failure. The overture this week is one of those rich, haunting and satisfying things. Should be, because Chopin wrote it. May 5th, 1925. Girl makes sudden exit when bow starts firing. Mobile woman testifies she dived into goods box. Any port in a storm was the theory of Rachel Russell, 22, when her alleged sweetheart, Harry Minto, entered the shoe repair shop on South Royal Street, to which Rachel lends the charm of her presence. The girl told Recorder Eddington that Minto, formerly a motorcycle cop, on Sunday started to shoot up the place, apparently without rhyme or reason, and that she did a head dive into a dry goods box until the artillery was silenced by detectives Jake Unter-Rayner and Burden, who covered Minto. Minto was charged Monday in police court with assault with a pistol and asked for a countenance until Friday, which was granted. Man dies as crowd drinks toast to him. George Whale, 75, presiding at a dinner of the Nationalist Press Association at the Trocadero restaurant last night, collapsed and died in the presence of 200 guests, just as Major G.H. Putnam, American Civil War veteran, was proposing a toast to his health. A few minutes before, Whale, responding to a toast to the association, said, "Let us eat, drink and be merry, for tomorrow we may die." Do I say that? No. I say take hands and help, for today we live. Dinner was in honour of the centenary of the birth of Thomas Huxley, and to encourage a campaign against Christian churches. Whale made a speech in which he ruthlessly attacked the dogmas of Christianity. He had just ridiculed a statement that the light of the Holy Ghost has guided the church for 19 centuries. May 6th, 1925. Liquor Lane is bottled up. Rum Row besieged from air, land and sea. Besieged from air, land and sea. Rum Row today faced starvation or surrender, as the dry flotilla and a squadron of seaplanes wove a web to cut off the food and water supply of the liquor-laden ships. While the Prohibition Navy was manoeuvring into a 50-mile blockade, 12 more government ships set sail for Liquor Lane. 20 picket boats began patrolling the Jersey coast, and automobile patrols were assigned to Coast Guard stations all along the Atlantic seaboard. Meanwhile, word was received from Boston that 25 Coast Guard craft, under sealed orders from Washington, had sailed to assist the New York and New Jersey fleets. Coast Guard officials here said the government planned similar operations against rum runners in the Great Lakes. Flapper Fanny says, "If some people are their own worst enemies, they certainly believe in loving their enemies." May 7th, 1925. Wife aids spouse in raid. Mrs. Helen T. Queen, who did not go to the country, has husband fined. My wife's gone to the country, hooray hooray. But Mrs. Helen T. Queen and her 2 children did not go to the country, as her husband, William P. Queen, 35 years old, 13th Street Northeast, found his cost today, according to the police reports. For 3 years, as soon as the buds and blossoms began to burst, Queen bundled off his wife and offsprings for a 6 months vacation. This year, however, Mrs. Queen became suspicious of her husband's solicitation for her health, the police say, and decided to stay in Washington, at least for a time. Last night, Mrs. Queen, accompanied by Lieutenant O.T. Davis and Detective M.O. Holmes of the Vice Squad, burst into the apartment of Mrs. Ella I. Brennan in southeast Washington. There, in the luxuriously apportioned apartment, the irate wife and her detective companions allege they found Queen and Mrs. Brennan. "There you are," said Mrs. Queen, but not with Roxy sweetness. She was mad clear through, and she took no pains to conceal her anger from her husband and Mrs. Brennan. Booked at the 2nd Precinct Station House, Mrs. Brennan deposited $25 collateral, which she forfeited today in police court. Ralph Given, Assistant United States Attorney, told the court today Mrs. Queen didn't want to have her husband spend time in jail, and asked that a fine be levied in lieu thereof. Queen thereupon was fined $5. Mrs. Brennan, an attractive woman, is said to have been employed in the Internal Revenue Bureau. May 8th, 1925. Error places US in role of saying humans eat cats. The Department of Agriculture has prepared a printed bulletin saying, "The cat crop ranks 3rd in importance. Cats traditionally constitute the banner horse feed of the world, and 3% is used for human consumption. The cat crop is subject to several diseases, chief of which are loose and covered smuts, stem rust, and crown rust." Then follows a discourse on wild cats, tame cats, broken cats, and wilted cats. The main varieties in the United States are given as Swedish Select, Silver Mines, and White Tartar. The trouble was that the linotype operator consistently hit the letter C instead of the letter O, and had turned a treatise on oats into one on cats. May 9th, 1925. Pilo nabbed again. Former cop caught by Snohomish Dries with big auto load of booze. Ed W. Pilo, former police sergeant and commonly called the Houdini of Seattle rum runners, lost much of his reputation, a sizable chunk of his property, and all of his disposition Friday, when Snohomish County deputy sheriffs arrested him with an auto load of liquor near Marysville. Pilo's big Mormon automobile, in which he was hauling 20 cases of beer and whiskey, will be seized by the government, according to F.A. Hazeltine, Divisional Prohibition Director. After evading US officers here for 2 months merely by wearing nose glasses, as he explained, to be arrested with a whole load of his own booze was a bitter pill for the ex-police sergeant to swallow, Hazeltine said. That Pilo had been in a terrific fist fight was indicated by his condition. He was battered and bloody and had severe bruises about the face and head, the Dry Chief said. Pilo gave the name of Ludlow to the Everett officers, but Leonard Reagan, local dry sleuth, easily recognised him in the Snohomish jail. He faces prosecution by the state authorities of Snohomish County. Pilo gained his reputation for elusiveness by dodging peace officers here after his indictment in the Olmsted conspiracy case. 2 weeks ago, he was taken by W.M. Whitney, Assistant Prohibition Director, as he was leaving a North End apartment house. He was released on bail. May 10th, 1925. Foxy Collie wins Mayflower Cruise by simple ruse. Rob Roy, the White House collie, got away with murder yesterday afternoon. That, of course, is according to the viewpoint of Paul Pry, the White House Airedale. Some of the White House attaches are also understood to side with Paul, but that's beside the point. The point being that Rob Roy pulled a new one yesterday, and today is listed among those present on the Mayflower, which is taking the President and his guests on their weekly cruise down the Potomac. Just as the President and Mrs. Coolidge were stepping into the White House limousine yesterday afternoon, Rob Roy trotted out to the car, placed his 4 feet on the running board, and looked into Mrs. Coolidge's face, as only a dog which is being left behind can look. Mrs. Coolidge leaned out and patted Rob Roy, and Rob Roy, the sly dog, let out a pitiful and long drawn-out whine. It was too much. He went on board. And last night Paul was going around with his tail between his legs asking everybody he met, "What's the world coming to anyhow?" May 11th, 1925. Homing pigeon wins race over French airplane. A homing pigeon today won a race between Paris and Brussels against an airplane. The airplane gave the pigeon a 3 hours handicap. Pigeons to the number of 610 were freed at the Le Bourget Aerodrome near Paris at 8 o'clock this morning. 3 of them reached Brussels before noon and 12:20 p.m, having negotiated the 275 kilometres, 170.88 miles, at an average of 70 kilometres, 43.5 miles an hour. The airplane took off at the aerodrome at 11 a.m. and reached Brussels at 12:30 p.m. The aviator began overtaking some of the straggling pigeons near Saint-Quentin. He passed many of them on the way to Brussels, but never quite caught up to the 3 leaders. May 12th, 1925. Pretty dancer to go to Occoquan. Pretty Dorothy E. Hoffman, 22-year-old dancer, who today is languishing in a cell at the district jail because she was caught driving a motorcar without a permit and convicted of reckless driving, will be sent to the district workhouse at Occoquan tomorrow, unless friends raise the $175 fine levied by Judge Gus A. Schult in traffic court. Miss Hoffman would have been bundled off in the van for the workhouse today, it was stated at the jail, but officials said they would allow her to remain until tomorrow, when 5 other women would be transferred to the Virginia Penal Institution. The girl insists Traffic Officer Van D. Hughes, who arrested her as a fresh driver 2 days ago, fired a shot at her car when it was travelling at a good rate of speed at 9th and E Streets. Captain Brown of the 1st Precinct emphatically denied the girl's charges. Miss Hoffman spent the day in her cell. She was nattily attired in a dark blue serge suit. Officials at the jail pointed out the contrast in apparel she will have to wear if she is taken to Occoquan. At that institution, she will wear a blue gingham dress. Instead of spending her time learning new dance steps, she will be compelled to peel potatoes, sweep floors, make beds, and sew uniforms. Miss Hoffman has refused to appeal to her father for aid. Mr. Hoffman lives in West Virginia. May 13th, 1925. Girl promised she'd shoot Shake. Mrs. Marion Bagnano tells on stand of threat by Olympia Macri. If Johnny Bagnano don't do what I tell him, someday I'm going to shoot him. If I don't shoot him, my father will shoot me. So declared Olympia Macri to her second cousin, Mrs. Marion Bagnano, according to the testimony given by Mrs. Bagnano today at the trial of the Macri girl for the murder of John Shake Bagnano, alleged father of her child. Mrs. Bagnano testified to numerous talks Olympia had with her concerning the defendant's baby. Olympia said she didn't know what to do about the baby, that she wanted Johnny Bagnano to support the kid. Mrs. Bagnano testified, I told her if it was Johnny's baby, she should take Johnny to court. Olympia said she was ashamed to do that. The witness said that one time when Olympia and Johnny were in her house, she locked the door when she thought Olympia's father was coming. Mrs. Bagnano described another visit to her house by Olympia. Here's a good chance for you. The witness testified she told Olympia, take my husband, I'll give you a home, I will go away. What's the matter? Do you want to get rid of your husband? Olympia replied, according to Mrs. Bagnano. I told her I was only joking and we both laughed, said the witness. The defendant nervously tapped the side of her chair during the testimony of her former confidant. May 14th, 1925. Dancer's fine paid. Friend saves Dorothy Hoffman from a Occoquan term. Dorothy Hoffman, 22-year-old dancer, was saved from a sojourn at the Occoquan penal farms for a period of 75 days, when she was released from jail Tuesday night after a friend had paid her fine of $175, imposed several days ago by Judge Schult for reckless driving and not having an operator's permit. The dancer was brought into night traffic court Monday, and after pleading guilty to the above charges, was committed to jail when she could not pay her fine. 24 hours elapsed before her release. May 15th, 1925. War is declared on billboards. Arts Federation votes to beautify America. Poster advertising attacked. In its battle to beautify America, the American Federation of Arts, in annual convention here today, declared war on billboards and made it clear that it would not be content until every billboard has been wiped out. Its first attack will be in the rural districts. Samuel N. Holliday, representative of the Poster Advertising Association, in defending billboards, ran into stiff opposition from other speakers. A.W. Crawford, Philadelphia, denied that poster advertising is even commercially profitable, declaring that only 1% of all advertising gets onto billboards. Billboards are educational, Mr. Holliday insisted. Billboards were denounced in a paper prepared by J. Horace McFarland, former president of the American Civic Association, read by Henry Turner Bailey, director of the Cleveland School of Art, who added a few comments of his own. An apology often advanced is that they conceal filth, according to Mr. McFarland. May 16th, 1925. Here she is. Can't you find her? For 3 days now, Sally has been rubbing shoulders with you. Find her and say the magic words. Here is the missing girl, as she looked peeping out of the taxi in which she toured the city Friday, and as she looked entering the Liberty Theatre later in the day. Say this when you see her. You are the thoughtless Sally sought throughout Seattle. Seeing Sally at the Liberty shows that Sally would be silly should she show Seattle who she is. Pursued by cars, gaped at by curious crowds, Sally skillfully managed to keep her identity secret during the time that she was in the midst of Seattle's business section Friday. The red-top taxi in which she drove through the main streets at noon was followed by drivers of other cars anxious to win the $5 prize offered the finder of Sally. The prize has risen to $75 today. The dexterous taxi driver managed to elude the pursuing vehicles, however, and down near the Smith building, Sally changed to another taxi, thus throwing her followers off the track. At 2 p.m, Sally entered the Liberty and was shown to a seat in the centre section on the outside. She arose 8 or 9 times to let patrons pass her in the aisle. She heard people all about her discussing her and saw a lot of sidelong glances directed towards her, but no one approached her with the fatal formula. Today, Sally will appear in the Liberty between 2 and 4 p.m, and in MacDougall and Southwick's between 4 and 5. Saturday noon, she will again be whisked through the main streets in a red-top taxi, announcing that this is Sally of the Liberty Theatre. Monday afternoon, she will be in the Liberty between 2 and 4. From there, she will walk to the post office and on to the Olympic. She will be using Colleen Moore perfume on that day. May 17th, 1925. Atlanta woman has 2 hubbies she doesn't love. The sudden appearance of her supposedly dead first husband after she had married a second brought the realization to Mrs. Quitter Lillian Price Gazette, young Atlanta woman, that she loved neither of the men. Mrs. Gazette had filed suit for an annulment of her second marriage to Albert W. Gazette since meeting with the first, Charles E. Price, whom she had been informed was killed in France during the World War. Price, however, the petition says, while in France, persuaded a friend to write his wife he was dead, and shortly after she remarried. I don't love either of them now, she told attorneys in filing the suit. I just want to be free. May 18th, 1925. Sally contest is getting easier all the time. Sally, as she appeared on Seattle's streets Saturday, if you find her, a prize of $100 is yours. Say this to Sally. In order to simplify matters, the formula has been cut down to the following. You are the thoughtless Sally sought throughout Seattle. The mysterious Sally had some narrow escapes Saturday. Twice she was approached, once outside and once inside the Liberty, but both parties, one a man and one a woman, ran amok on the tongue twister and faded back into the crowd, covered with confusion. During the time she was walking to the Owl drugstore, from there to the post office, and thence to MacDougall Southwick's, she was the target of drivers' curious glances, but that's as far as things went. The elusive girl's schedule for Monday is noon to ride through town in a red-top taxi, 2 to 2:30 to appear in Liberty Foyer alone, 3 to 3:20 to enter the front entrance of Rhodes Bros in the arcade, between 3:30 and 4 to appear in Frederick and Nelson's, will go in through main entrance. In order that working folks may enter the contest, she will appear in the Liberty Foyer Monday night between 8 and 8:30. She will be using Colleen Moore perfume and will be dressed simply and modestly. Sally is getting easier to find every day. The prize for her discoverer has reached the $100 mark, where it will remain. May 19th, 1925. Sally's just dying to be found. Look for her tonight at Liberty. Here is Sally herself. You probably passed her and weren't on the lookout enough to know it. Remember, it means $100. Say this to Sally. You are the thoughtless Sally sought throughout Seattle. And still, Sally roams at large through the streets of Seattle, with the price of $100 perched precariously on her comely head. And still, the search for her is being made simpler and simpler. Tonight, between 8 and 8:30, she will stand alone in front of the Liberty, where Colleen Moore is playing in Sally. Chances are she won't stand there long before some daring soul steps up to her, speaks a few words, and thereby puts a nice fat check into his wallet. Sally is about 5 feet 5 inches tall, weighs about 115 pounds, has blue eyes and brown hair. Of course, one would expect a girl who the whole nation has been seeking for months to be, well, worth seeking for. Rumour has it that Sally is. So look for her tonight, 8 o'clock, in front of the Liberty. Chaplin wins fight against imitators. Charles Chaplin, film comedian, was granted an injunction today, restraining his imitators from using his trick makeup in the movies. Superior Judge John L. Hudner issued the restraining order in the case brought by Chaplin against Charles Amador and Associates. The injunction forbids further use of the name Charles Aplin and other imitation by him or associated defendants of plaintiff or his advertising. May 20th, 1925. Hooray! Sally is found. Long-lost girl at last returns to her alley through efforts of star. Man utters magic words. Long-lost Sally, and in the circle, her discoverer, F.L. McCoskrie. McCoskrie won the $100 prize last night by approaching the girl in front of the Liberty and repeating the designated words without a mistake. Now that Sally has been found, she will probably return to her alley in search of peace and quiet. Sally's found, and may the vocal organs of all raucous tenors rest in peace henceforth. F.L. McCoskrie was the first person to confront the wayward miss as she appeared in front of the Liberty Theatre Tuesday night, and to say to her without hesitation, "You are the thoughtless Sally sought throughout Seattle." Sally, thus addressed, could do naught but admit her identity, and so McCoskrie won the $100 prize and the eternal gratitude of the hordes of Americans who have had the missing alley girl on their minds these many months. Others in the crowd that gathered in front of the Liberty attempted to corner Sally, but became confused on the tongue twister and allowed themselves to be thrown off the track. Of course, Sally, being a capricious person, it was her pleasure to do all she could to make it difficult for her accoster. McCoskrie is a salesman for the Board and Milk Company. He says he is going to send the $100 to his parents in Spokane, who he is supporting. He lives at the Houston Hotel. May 21st, 1925. Wild man captured. Capture effected by telling him angels came for him. Frank Beard, Prentiss County's wild man who terrorized residents for a week by appearances in the nude at various places in the county, and who submitted to capture today only after officers convinced him they were angels sent for him, tonight was pronounced insane. Lightning kills man 150 feet down in mineshaft. Lightning descended in a mineshaft 150 feet to claim a victim near here late yesterday. A bolt struck a steam boiler with a deafening crash, at the time dazing Roy Phoenix, hoisterman, who was tending the firebox. It followed the course of a steam pipe leading into the bosom of the earth and killed William Fry, 22, who was standing next to the pipe. May 22nd, 1925. Mexican woman acquitted. Shot loser in card game as per agreement. Senorita Hortense Cortez is not guilty of murdering her lover, although she culminated a revel with him with a game of cards in which it was agreed that the winner was to shoot the other. Hortense won. Concepcion Saucedo, the other player in the grim drunken game, handed Hortense his revolver. She shot him dead. That was last December. Thursday, a jury absolved Hortense of guilt, while the courtroom crowd cheered and the crowds in the streets echoed their joyous bellows. It was Ascension Day, and many Mexicans had chosen to spend the holiday loitering around the courtroom to learn the fate of the reckless girl. Fashionable diners attack dry agents. Use chairs and bottles when New York nightclub is raided. Officers draw guns. Attacked with chairs and bottles early today, 2 federal prohibition agents attempting to make arrests in the exclusive nightclub Trocadero on 51st Street were compelled to draw their guns to subdue fashionable diners. The agents, William J. McKay and Michael Sassy, in evening clothes and tortoiseshell glasses, paid $20 for a pitcher of champagne. They grabbed the waiter. The manager, Frank Galesko, is said to have interfered. In an instant, the place was in an uproar. Women screamed, while men in dress suits tore blackjacks from the agents' hands. The latter succeeded in arresting the head waiter, Albino Scaroni, and the manager only after threatening to shoot. Many such clubs as the Trocadero have been padlocked in the last few months at the instigation of Federal Attorney Buckner, who started his service in office by spending $1,500 of his own money through fashionable friends for champagne. Admission to these gilded clubs in the Roaring Forties is usually denied to those unknown to the management, which takes precautions through peepholes. May 23rd, 1925. Society and personal. Activities of women. A hat you can make yourself. Here's a nifty little bonnet, and here's how you do it. Provide yourself with a yard of 15-inch crepe maricane. Pleat it in the centre, holding it with a big brooch. Put on your head so the brooch is in the centre of your forehead. Then cross the ends at the back and roll each end around the head. You can tie in a knot at one side, or can tuck the ends underneath. You have a smart little turban toque that you can make up fresh each time you wear it. 107 still likes the girls. They never get too old to like the girls. Jonathan Falk, 107, who has just moved to the Soldiers' Home at Danville, Illinois, admits he likes them, although he thinks flappers are silly. Jonathan, shown above, with Martha Lindbergh, was born at Marion, Iowa. May 24th, 1925. Man freed on Utah charge is rearrested. Presto, change, hocus pocus habeas corpus. Lemuel Barber was released from jail, but was pinched and thrown in again before he had time to descend the courthouse steps yesterday afternoon. Lem was in the Hooskow for 2 or 3 days after being arrested on telegraphic information to the effect that he was wanted in California for forgery. Habeas corpus proceedings were brought yesterday and he was ordered released by Judge C.O. Brown of Converse County, who sat on the case in the absence of Judge Bryant S. Cromer. He was released because the only thing on which he was held was the California telegram. While this action was taking place, there was a different transaction cooking in County Attorney Weddell's office. J.W. Tucker, manager of the Wyatt Hotel, was swearing to a warrant charging Barber with issuing him a fraudulent check for $17.50. A few minutes afterwards, Dyer Hayes, assistant prosecutor, who had been representing the state in the habeas corpus proceedings, told Barber he was a free man, and at the top of the courthouse steps, Deputy Sheriff Frank Rutledge released him. Barber hesitated, as though he thought the ways of the law are at once queer and wonderful, and with a thank you to the officials, started to walk down the steps. On the next to the last step to the bottom, he was met by Under Sheriff Jack Carter, who read to him the new warrant and rearrested him. May 25th, 1925. Missing 5 years, claims fortune. Man gave up medical career to be businessman. Missing more than 5 years, during which a countrywide search was instituted for him. Dr. Charles F. Hastings, heir to a $50,000 legacy left him by his mother, has been located in Erie, where he was known as John Hugh, owner of a toy shop. As soon as he learned through newspapers that he was being sought, Dr. Hastings identified himself to Erie authorities and is now in communication with his attorney in New York concerning the property left him by his mother, Mrs. Carolyn F. Hastings, who died in Ithaca, New York, May 8. Dr. Hastings disappeared from Pittsburgh late in 1919, where he had been an intern at the homeopathic hospital. He worked on farms and in vineyards in Pennsylvania and spent his summers at Chautauqua Lake, New York. Leaving Pittsburgh, he assumed the name of John Hugh, believing his real name to be too fancy to obtain work as a labourer. He left home, he said, following a family disagreement about his career, and avowed that he was now a businessman and proud of it. Dr. Hastings passed the state examination to practice medicine after completing his internship. Business appealed to him, he pointed out, and he preferred to be a member of the Blue Shirt Gang rather than a professional man. May 26th, 1925. Few real faints, many faked ones disrupt school. 2 or 3 pupils of the 8th grade at the Blaine Public School fainted today, supposedly the result of their exertions at play in the schoolyard, and a number of others toppled over to excite the teachers, firemen reported today, after rushing resuscitating machines to the school in the belief that a large number had been overcome by gas. Although the school principal stated merely that the children had fainted, it also was reported that a gas main had broken in or near the building and that fumes had affected nearly 24 of the school children. May 27th, 1925. Prohibition chief says bootleggers sell rank poison. People might as well stop kidding themselves about the good stuff they are getting when their bootlegger confidently assures them of the source of liquor they are buying. In making the statement, James R. Davis, Federal Prohibition Director for Michigan, added to it by declaring more than 90% of the booze being brought is compounded of rank poison. There is no old stuff for sale, Davis said. It's all fake whiskey, and you needn't kid yourself that what you're buying is good. Bootleggers are so adept at making labels and seals, even an expert is fooled sometimes. In a raid early this month upon a 2-story brick house, we uncovered among other things the following: 12 different brands of whiskey bottle tinfoil in quantities of from 100 to 6,000. More than that, many different brands of labels. A complete package of Canadian revenue stamps. Several hundred new boxes with branding apparatus to brand them as desired. An electric motor and bottle capping machine capable of competing with some machines in breweries. Hundreds of gallons of rank, raw booze made in a dirty vat that one would not care to wash his hands in. 50 gallons of grain alcohol, 5 gallons of colouring, steel mixing tank, and everything necessary to convert alcohol into whiskey or any drink a customer desired. May 28th, 1925. Reflections of Dorothy Dix. Dear Dorothy Dix, should I marry just because everyone tells me what an affliction it is to be an old maid? I don't care to marry, but the everlasting slurs thrown at old maids are getting on my nerves. I have a chance to marry a man whom I do not love, but who would save me from being an old maid. I await your reply. Susie. Answer. My dear Susie, I did not know there was anybody left in the world so behind the times that she thought it was any reflection on a woman to be an old maid. In olden times, when marriage was the only reputable business in which a woman could engage, and wifehood the only career that offered any reward, women had to marry, whether they wanted to or not. Otherwise, they were compelled to eat the bitter bread of dependence and occupy the back seat. Then, when it was obvious that every woman would marry if she possibly could, to be an old maid was to advertise the fact that a woman lacked all personal charms. So it was no wonder that she was looked upon as more or less of a failure and became the Gibbs of fools. Also, because she had no life of her own, no interests of her own, no work, no occupation on which she could spend her energies and employ her brain, the old maid naturally became a pest. Because she had nothing to love, the milk of human kindness soured in her. Because she was dependent, she became bitter and envious. Because she had no pie of her own, she stuck her fingers in other people's pies. Because she had no interests of her own, she pried into the affairs of others. So she became what circumstances made her: gossiping, curious, meddling, bitter, and was disliked and feared accordingly. But now we have changed all that. Every avenue of human endeavour is open to women. They can do whatever they want to, just as much as men can. They can make money, indulge their own tastes, set up their own homes, amuse themselves, and the unmarried woman is happy and prosperous and contented. She is no longer a sinister figure in the community. She is the good angel in it. Nobody slurs at old maids these days. They are envied. If a woman finds a worthy man she loves, she does well to marry, for married happiness is the nearest approach to heaven we ever get on earth. But to marry to escape being an old maid is the height of folly, and is sure to precipitate disaster upon you. Don't be silly enough to do such an idiotic thing. Just tell those who twit you on being an old maid that it is better not to be married than not to be glad because you are married, and that they are envious because they don't stand in your shoes. Dorothy Dix. May 29th, 1925. Clerk, 21 years, faces 5-year term for alleged 25-cent rhubarb theft. After 21 years in the United States Postal Service, Max Rope, 40, faces a possible prison sentence because of 9 sticks of rhubarb, valued at perhaps 25 cents. Rope is on trial in federal court here, charged with the theft of the rhubarb from a package of mail. The government completed its case against the veteran employee late yesterday, and today the defence begins. Office politics, it was indicated, will be the basis of the defence. Defence attorneys on cross-examination questioned witnesses about office politics. Co-workers of Ropes testified yesterday as to his taking the rhubarb from a package at a post office substation. It is not the value of the property, but the principle involved, C.C. Madison, United States District Attorney, told the jury in his opening statement. The charge carries a maximum penalty of 5 years imprisonment or a fine of $5,000, or both. One unofficial estimate placed the cost to the government of prosecuting Rope as high as $10,000. May 30th, 1925. Held as gun flapper. Catherine Louise Zaramba, 19, was arrested in Chicago together with another girl and 3 youths, all of whom were charged as acting as a band of taxi bandits. She confessed, according to police, that she wielded the revolver in the hold-ups while her companions went through the pockets of their victims because it thrilled her. Professor says small collars indicate big brains. If you wish to hire brains, hire men who wear small collars. The thinner the neck, the greater the probability of intelligence. This has been figured out by Dr. William Sheldon, psychologist, University of Chicago, who has studied 450 freshmen, comparing the size of their collars with their markings in class. He offers no theory to account for this, but the popular campus explanation is that thin necks, like thin pipes, tend to prevent leakage of the intelligence. Sisters have twins. What is perhaps without a parallel in the birth annals of Kentucky was reported by Dr. W. L. Vickers, Franklin physician, yesterday, who said he attended the delivery of twins on the same day to 2 sisters, Mrs. Coles Summers and Mrs. Dillard Dawes, both living near here. Brothers, sisters, mothers, aunts and cousins all were reported doing well. May 31st, 1925. Lowdown bum is judge's estimate of father of 9. Contending the man was a lowdown bum, Circuit Judge E.T. Fairchild, sitting in juvenile court late Friday, ordered a father of 9 children out of the courtroom. The father, whose children range in age from 2 to 11, faced a charge of non-support. Owing to pains in his head, he was unable to work, the man told the court attachés. A physician's examination showed the man was in good health. The children were placed under control of the court. "Here's the gun," she cried, and burglar left. A woman's presence of mind was responsible for frightening away a burglar who attempted to loot her home while she was alone early Saturday, according to a report at police headquarters. Mrs. Ida Crams, 34th Avenue, was awakened at 3:30 a.m. by a light shining into her bedroom from the hall. Mr. Crams was out of the city and the woman was alone, but instead of becoming frightened and panic-stricken, she jumped from the bed, began to rattle the drawers of a bureau, and finally announced in a loud voice, "Here's your revolver, Bill." The burglar fled out of the front door, and Mrs. Crams saw him get into an automobile which was parked across the street. Thanks for watching. Please let me know what you thought in the comments, and please also consider watching another one of my videos. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.